Most people assume they understand what age is, yet a closer look at human consciousness, neuroscience, and the nature of time itself reveals something far more mysterious. Age feels like an absolute truth only because the mind treats it that way. But when one studies how the brain interprets time, how the body responds to perception, and how awareness experiences reality, it becomes clear that age is not a fixed identity. It is a shifting psychological construct. And the moment this becomes visible, everything about your relationship with yourself begins to change. One of the clearest demonstrations of this comes from a well-known Harvard experiment that challenged the very idea of aging. A group of elderly men spent a week inside an environment recreated exactly as it had been decades earlier. The music, the magazines, the furniture, the conversations, the television programs, everything around them was designed to reflect the world of their youth. And something remarkable happened. By the end of the experiment, many of them showed measurable improvements in posture, joint flexibility, memory, and overall energy. Nothing physical or medical had changed. The only thing that shifted was their perception of age. Their bodies responded directly to the way their minds interpreted time. This experiment reveals something profound. The body does not age according to calendar years alone. It ages according to psychological time, emotional time, and the stories that shape one's self-image. Biology listens to belief far more closely than most people realize. When someone feels old internally, the entire system behaves as if decline is inevitable. When someone feels open, curious, and connected to life, the internal system reorganizes itself around vitality. Physics points to a similar truth. Einstein demonstrated that time is not absolute. It bends, stretches, and behaves differently depending on perspective, speed, and gravity. Two clocks in two different places do not tick the same way. Time flows unevenly across the universe. And if time is not fixed, the experience of age cannot be fixed either. The brain does not keep time like a machine clock. It measures time through emotion, attention, and awareness. This is why fear can make minutes feel like hours, and joy can make hours feel like minutes. This is why childhood summers felt endless, while adult years disappear in a blur. Time is not passing. One is passing through different states of consciousness and calling that passage age. This realization opens a new doorway. Age is not what the mind thinks it is. The number of years lived is not the same as the experience of being alive. The number on a document measures astronomical cycles, not inner truth. It tracks how many times the Earth has orbited the Sun since your birth, but it says nothing about your vitality, potential, or depth of awareness. These qualities are shaped by presence, not calendars. Yet people cling to age as if it defines their existence. They carry beliefs like, I am running out of time, or I should have achieved more by this age, or I am too old to begin again. These beliefs, not the passing of years, are what create suffering. The psychological weight of age is heavier than the biological one. The brain responds to thoughts as if they were facts. When someone repeatedly tells themselves that they are too old to change, the body behaves as if growth is no longer possible. When someone believes they have lost their chance, the nervous system interprets that belief as danger, creating stress, tension, and withdrawal. Yet none of this comes from age itself. It comes from the idea of age. The truth is simpler. The body moves through time, but awareness does not. The presence that is here right now is the same presence that watched childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. It observed years pass, yet it did not age with them. It is like a sky watching clouds. The clouds change shape, color, and direction, but the sky remains open, unbroken, and untouched. When someone identifies with the clouds, life feels unstable. When someone recognizes themselves as the sky, age loses its sharpness. The pressure of time begins to dissolve. Life shifts from being a race to being a flow. Age becomes heavy only when it becomes personal, when it turns into an identity, a label, a story, when one looks at others and compares timelines, when one imagines they should be further ahead, when one carries regret for not becoming a certain version of themselves by a certain age. These burdens are created by thought, not by time. As inner awareness grows, these burdens begin to soften. One starts to notice that the sense of age changes depending on mood, mindfulness, and connection to the present moment. On days of stress, life feels shorter and heavier. On days of clarity, life feels open and spacious. This reveals that age is not a constant. It is influenced by attention. Before sleep, when the mind quiets and the noise of the day fades, it becomes easier to sense this. In the softness of night, identity loosens. The stories the mind repeats grow quieter, and beneath those stories, presence remains. Presence feels ageless, not because the body is immortal, but because the body is not the core of who you are. Age is like dust settling on a mirror. It can cover the surface, but the reflection underneath remains unchanged. The problem is that most people stare only at the dust and forget the mirror entirely. They believe the dust is themselves. They believe the years define their essence. But essence cannot be defined by time. Essence is the awareness that watches time. Spiritual traditions have long taught that the true self is ageless. Modern science does not contradict this. Presence does not age. Awareness does not weaken. The observer remains the same through every change in the body and mind. What ages is the form, not the formlessness within it. This understanding does not deny the reality of physical aging. It simply shifts the focus away from identity and toward experience. Instead of saying, "I am this age," one can begin to notice age as something appearing within awareness, a movement, a phase, a shape that life takes temporarily. When age is no longer fused with identity, something remarkable happens. The fear of aging weakens. The pressure to meet deadlines dissolves. The regret of the past softens. The anxiety of the future quiets. And what remains is the present moment, deeper than ever before. Age becomes fluid. Age becomes open. Age becomes a dance instead of a burden. And in that dance, something within begins to awaken. Once the idea of age begins to loosen, something profound starts to shift inside. The experience of life becomes different. What once felt heavy begins to feel lighter. What once felt urgent begins to slow down. And what once seemed like a fixed story begins to reveal itself as something fluid and open. The transformation does not happen because time moves differently. It happens because awareness does. Age, when seen as identity, creates tension. It creates a sense of racing against the clock, a belief that life must be controlled, measured, or optimized before it is too late. But when age becomes experience instead of identity, the tension dissolves. Life stops feeling like a countdown and starts feeling like a flow. Many things begin to change all at once. One of the first changes happens in the relationship with the past. When age is seen as identity, the past becomes a source of regret. There is a constant feeling of having missed the right moment, the right chance, the right version of oneself. But regret is built on the assumption that life should have followed a timeline designed by thought. When that timeline no longer defines you, the past loses its weight. The experiences that once felt like failures or delays begin to look different. They become forms of growth, stages of development, threads in a much larger pattern. The past does not change, but the meaning of the past changes. And that shift is everything. Neuroscience has shown that memory is not a fixed record, but a reconstruction. Each time a memory is recalled, The brain modifies it slightly, updating it with the emotional state of the present moment. This means that when your perception of age changes, your memories change with it. They stop hurting the same way. They stop limiting you. They stop being proof of who you think you are supposed to be. Instead, they become lessons that deepen your awareness. The next transformation happens in the relationship with the future. When age is identity, the future feels like a narrowing tunnel. Every year that passes appears to reduce possibility. People say things like time is running out, or I'm too old for this, or it's too late to start again. But these thoughts do not arise from reality. They arise from the belief that life must match a map drawn by the mind. When that map dissolves, the future stops being a threat. It becomes an open space once more. The human brain is designed to anticipate, but anticipation can either support growth or create fear. Studies in psychology show that when someone believes they have limited time left, creativity decreases, risk tolerance shrinks, and the nervous system becomes more reactive. However, when someone feels spaciousness around time, even if their chronological age remains the same, the brain shifts into a more expansive state. Innovation increases, curiosity rises, courage returns. It becomes possible to imagine new paths. This change does not depend on age, it depends on perception. One of the most powerful effects of this shift is the dissolving of internal pressure. Many people live with a constant feeling that they should already be somewhere else in life. They compare themselves to others, measure their progress, and worry that they are falling behind. But behind what? Behind whom? Life does not move according to a universal schedule. It moves according to consciousness. When the mind stops comparing timelines, the pressure begins to fade, and in that space, peace emerges. Another change happens at the level of self-worth. When people identify with age, their sense of value often rises and falls with the number. Some feel superior when they are younger, others feel inferior when they age. But both reactions come from the same misunderstanding. Value is not created by time. Value is revealed by awareness. When age is no longer tied to identity, self-worth becomes rooted in something far deeper. Confidence grows, not because the body looks a certain way, but because the inner presence recognizes its own timelessness. This shift in identity also changes relationships. Many relationships are built around expectations tied to age, how one should behave at certain stages, what one should want, what one should achieve, or how one should appear. These expectations create tension, misunderstanding, and disconnection. But when awareness deepens, these expectations fall away. Relationships become more honest because they are no longer shaped by timelines. They become more compassionate because the focus shifts from roles to essence. They become more spacious because each person is allowed to grow at their own rhythm. A deeper shift occurs in how one experiences the body. When age is seen as identity, every physical change feels like a loss. But the body is not losing anything. It is transitioning, transforming, adapting. Every year the body becomes a new version of itself. This is not decline, it is evolution. Awareness sees this, and when awareness guides perception, physical changes become less threatening. The body becomes a companion instead of a battlefield. You begin to work with it rather than against it. Modern research in psychoneuroimmunology shows something surprising. The immune system responds to emotional states more rapidly than previously believed. When people feel old, defeated, or stuck, the immune response weakens. But when they feel present, open, and engaged with life, the immune response strengthens. This means that your biology listens to your awareness. And when awareness is free from the burden of age, the biology adjusts. There is also a shift in how time itself is experienced. When someone is lost in thought, time feels rigid and heavy. But when someone is present, time feels soft and spacious. This is why meditation and mindfulness practices often make people feel younger. The mind slows down, the body relaxes, and the heart opens. Presence changes the perception of time, and the perception of time changes the experience of age. One of the most profound effects of this shift is emotional clarity. Many emotional wounds are tied to thoughts like, I should be further along by now, or I wasted years, or I'm too late for joy. These thoughts create guilt and sadness. But when age stops being identity, these emotions lose their fuel. A new understanding emerges. The past was what it needed to be. The present is what it must be. And the future will unfold through awareness, not through pressure. Before sleep, this understanding becomes especially powerful. Night is a doorway to inner clarity. When the mind softens and the body relaxes, thoughts lose their grip. This is the perfect moment to release the idea of age. In the quiet of night, age feels less like identity and more like movement. You may feel that the awareness watching your thoughts has never grown older. It has been the same presence through every version of your body. This recognition is not an idea, it is an experience. And once it is felt, it begins to reshape your entire life. You stop chasing time. You stop fearing time. You stop trying to outrun yourself. Instead, you begin to live with a sense of inner freedom. You begin to make choices based on intuition instead of fear. You begin to act from presence instead of pressure. Age becomes a background rhythm instead of a defining story. It becomes something you witness, not something you are. And in that simple shift, a deeper dimension of life opens. You feel less fragmented and more whole, less limited and more expansive, less anxious and more at peace. This transformation prepares you for something even deeper, because once you stop identifying with age, you begin to see who you truly are beneath all the layers of time. And that realization changes everything. This understanding does not deny the reality of physical aging. It simply shifts the focus away from identity and toward experience. Instead of saying, I am this age, one can begin to notice age as something appearing within awareness, a movement, a phase, a shape that life takes temporarily. When age is no longer fused with identity, something remarkable happens. The fear of aging weakens. The pressure to meet deadlines dissolves. The regret of the past softens. The anxiety of the future quiets. And what remains is the present moment, deeper than ever before. Age becomes fluid. Age becomes open. Age becomes a dance instead of a burden. And in that dance, something within begins to awaken. Something remarkable happens once the idea of age stops sitting at the center of your identity. A quiet shift unfolds, not loud or dramatic, but steady, like the turning of a tide. Awareness begins to reveal the truth that has been present your entire life. The part of you that observes age does not age. This recognition may appear subtle, but it changes the entire architecture of your inner world. Most people go through life believing that time is pressing upon them from the outside. They feel chased by deadlines, haunted by missed opportunities, and weighed down by years that seem to move faster with each passing season. But the pressure does not come from time itself. It comes from identification with time. When awareness stops clinging to age as identity, that pressure dissolves like fog under sunlight. One of the most profound shifts begins in the emotional body. Feelings that once seemed tied to age begin to lose their grip. There is no longer the same sense of urgency, no longer the same subtle fear that happiness has an expiration date. This emotional release also alters behavior. People who no longer identify rigidly with age often become more curious, more playful, and more open to new experiences. They stop saying things like, I'm too old for that, or it's too late to begin again. Not because they deny the passage of time, but because the passage of time no longer defines their possibilities. This is not positive thinking. It is a neurological shift. Studies in cognitive psychology show that when a person believes they are limited by age, the prefrontal cortex enters a restrictive mode. Decision-making becomes more conservative, creativity decreases, and the stress response increases. But when age is perceived as flexible or secondary, those same cognitive pathways shift into an expansive mode. The brain begins forming new associations, imagining new futures, and generating new solutions. Your perception of age literally rewires your mind. This shift also heals something deeper, the fear of running out of time. Many people do not realize how much of their anxiety is rooted in this fear. It hides behind other emotions, frustration, envy, sadness, restlessness. But underneath them all is a quiet belief that time is slipping away and that the self is shrinking with it. When that belief dissolves, a new sense of spaciousness emerges. Life begins to feel wider. Moments begin to feel fuller. There is room to breathe, to feel, to experience without fear. This understanding changes how you relate to change itself. People often resist change because they believe they are losing years. But change is not loss. Change is movement. Age reveals that movement. It shows the unfolding of experience, the evolution of perspective, the deepening of presence. When age is no longer seen as a threat, change becomes easier to accept. Even the transitions that once felt frightening, endings, transitions, new chapters, begin to look like natural expressions of life. This recognition also transforms how you see other people. When you are trapped in your own timeline, you tend to measure others the same way, by accomplishments, by career, by relationship status, by age milestones. But once age stops defining you, it stops defining them as well. People begin to appear as experiences rather than roles, as moving expressions of awareness rather than fixed characters. Relationships become more compassionate because you stop expecting people to fit into your timeline. They are allowed to grow, evolve, and transform at their own rhythm. This leads to deeper connection, deeper empathy, and deeper honesty. But perhaps the most profound shift happens in your sense of self. When age is identity, the self feels fragile. It depends on how you look, what you've achieved, how you compare to others, and how much time you believe you have left. This creates anxiety because anything that threatens these elements feels like a threat to your very existence. But once age becomes experience instead of identity, the sense of self becomes rooted in something far more stable, the awareness watching it all. That awareness does not weaken, it does not wrinkle, it does not fade. It has been the same presence through every stage of your life: childhood, adolescence, adulthood, always watching, always perceiving, always here. When this becomes clear, a new form of inner strength emerges. You feel less afraid of the future, less ashamed of the past, and more anchored in the present. This is what makes nighttime such a powerful moment for transformation. Before sleep, the mind becomes more porous. The critical thinking centers soften, the emotional body becomes tender, and the subconscious becomes receptive. It is the perfect moment to release the idea of age because the mind is no longer defending an identity. In that quiet openness, a new understanding can take root. When you lie down at night, breathe deeply, and feel into the awareness that is watching the thoughts about age, something subtle happens. You begin to recognize that the awareness doing the watching feels timeless. It does not feel older or younger. It feels the same at every stage of your life. This recognition is not an intellectual idea. It is an inner memory, a truth felt beneath thought. In this state, many people report a surprising sensation, the feeling of becoming their true age, not the number, but the consciousness behind the number. a consciousness that does not move through time, but through experience. The more this recognition deepens, the more it changes how you behave during the day. Decisions begin to come from clarity instead of fear. You stop chasing youth and you stop resisting age. You stop needing to outrun time because you realize time is not your opponent. You begin to live more presently, more intentionally, more authentically. Life feels less like something that is happening to you and more like something you are participating in. And in this clarity, another truth becomes visible. The story of your age is just one chapter in a much larger book. There are studies showing that people who feel younger than their age have lower stress markers, healthier immune systems, and longer lifespans, not because they deny reality, but because they align with a different relationship to reality. Awareness influences biology. State of mind influences physiology. The inner perception of age influences the outer expression of health. This means something extraordinary. Your body listens to your consciousness. When consciousness expands, the body responds. When you stop shrinking yourself with thoughts about being too late or too old, the body stops shrinking with you. It opens, it relaxes, it regenerates. Your energy rises, your mind sharpens, and your emotional resilience grows. This is the beginning of awakening. Awakening does not start with mystical visions or spiritual techniques. It begins with a simple realization. You are not who time says you are. And when that realization is felt deeply, your life begins to transform from the inside out. You love more openly because fear loses its foundation. You create more freely because pressure dissolves. You forgive more easily because the past feels less rigid. You trust more deeply because the future feels less threatening. You live more fully because the present becomes enough. Awakening is not an escape from age. It is the freedom to live beyond it. It is the recognition that the awareness living this life is timeless, and because of that, every age is the perfect age. Tonight, when you close your eyes to sleep, allow yourself to feel the awareness behind your thoughts. Feel the stillness behind the years. Feel the presence that has been with you through every chapter. Let that presence remind you that you are not your age. You are the consciousness experiencing it. And when this becomes clear, something extraordinary unfolds. Life stops being a countdown and becomes a continuation of awareness, a continuation of growth, a continuation of awakening. This is what changes after you sleep with a different understanding of age. This is what unfolds when age stops defining you. This is how awakening begins, quietly, deeply, and unmistakably. This understanding does not deny the reality of physical aging. It simply shifts the focus away from identity and toward experience. Instead of saying, "I am this age," one can begin to notice age as something appearing within awareness, a movement, a phase, a shape that life takes temporarily. When age is no longer fused with identity, something remarkable happens. The fear of aging weakens. The pressure to meet deadlines dissolves. The regret of the past softens. The anxiety of the future quiets. And what remains is the present moment, deeper than ever before. Age becomes fluid. Age becomes open. Age becomes a dance instead of a burden. And in that dance, something within begins to awaken.